The galaxy had never been quiet. Even in the deepest voids, between the cold glow of distant stars, there was always movement. Radiation storms whispered through empty systems. Gravity tugged gently at drifting dust. Time itself seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting in slow, eternal rhythms. Civilizations learned early that space was not empty. It was alive, and it respected only those who understood its rules. For over 3,000 cycles, the Threxian Concord had ruled the Relos expanse by force and certainty. Their fleets were monuments of dominance, vast, radiant constructs of gold and white alloy, layered with shields that shimmered like captured suns. Wherever they traveled, trade routes bent to their will. Smaller species paid tribute. Border worlds surrendered without resistance. The Concord did not negotiate with weakness. They erased it. From the command spire of the flagship Ascendant Clarity, High Admiral Valor Kethrix observed the stars with practiced detachment. His species had evolved beneath crushing gravity, their bodies hardened by necessity, their culture shaped by survival through conquest. To the Threxians, hierarchy was not cruelty, it was order, and order was sacred. "Admira," came the voice of the sensor chief, sharp and precise. "We are detecting multiple warp exits at the system's edge." Valor did not turn immediately. "Classification: unknown vessels. Configuration does not match any registered fleet." That earned his attention. He stepped closer to the tactical display as faint distortions bloomed across the projection. Space folded inward, then released, smoothly, cleanly. Ships emerged. Not many, 7 vessels in total. They drifted forward in loose formation, their silhouettes angular and dark against the starlight. No ceremonial lighting, no radiant hull markings, no visible weapon arrays charging for battle. Silence stretched across the bridge. Valor studied them. "These are small," he said at last. The weapons officer adjusted magnification. "Hull mass within cruiser range, energy output minimal, shield signatures are unconventional." Another officer clicked softly, an expression of disbelief. "Are these scouts?" The sensor chief hesitated. "Their transponder identifies them as a sovereign defense fleet." That drew a ripple of amusement from the bridge crew. Valor's mandibles flexed in what passed for a smile. "So," he said calmly, "this is humanity." The name carried little weight in Threxian records, a relatively new species, late to faster-than-light travel, limited territorial reach, no great wars of galactic consequence. They came from a volatile star system, catalogued long ago and dismissed as unremarkable. No one had expected them to arrive here, certainly not like this. "Open a channel," Valor ordered. "Let us educate our guests." The human captain appeared almost instantly. She was seated, posture straight but relaxed. Her uniform bore no excessive decoration, just a simple emblem at the collar and rank markings worn smooth with use. Her face was calm, eyes steady, voice measured. "This is Captain Mara Ilyas of the United Earth Fleet. You are entering a protected transit region. We request that you halt your advance." The bridge erupted in quiet clicks and murmurs. "Request?" someone whispered. Valor stepped forward, looming closer to the projection. "Captain Ilyas, you stand before the Concord fleet. This region now falls under our jurisdiction. I'm aware of your claim. It conflicts with existing treaties." Valor let out a slow, deliberate breath. "Treaties are maintained by power. You do not appear to possess sufficient quantities."
That finally earned laughter, low, resonant, spreading across the bridge. Valor raised a claw, silencing them. "Then you have chosen the correct posture," he said. "Withdraw your vessels. We will forget this interruption." Her response was immediate. "We're not withdrawing either." The silence that followed was different, heavier. "You misunderstand your position," Valor said slowly. "Your ships would not survive a direct engagement." "That's possible," she said, "but irrelevant." Valor tilted his head. "Explain." "We're not relying on survival," Captain Elias replied. "We're relying on restraint." Valor's mandibles stiffened. He turned to his weapons commander. "Demonstrate the consequences of misplaced confidence." A single Threxian cruiser broke formation, its forward emitters ignited, channeling energy drawn from a reactor older than humanity's entire spacefaring history. The beam fired, pure, controlled annihilation. It crossed the void in less than a second, and then it curved. Not violently, not abruptly. It bent, like light passing through a lens, sliding harmlessly past the lead human vessel and dissipating into nothingness. The bridge froze. "What?" the weapons officer snapped. "That's impossible." "Fire again," Valor ordered, his voice sharp now. 2 beams followed, then 4. Each one curved away. Each one missed. No shields flared, no countermeasures activated. Space itself simply refused to cooperate. Captain Ilias spoke again, her tone unchanged. "Admiral, this is your final warning." Valor stared at the display, unease creeping into his thoughts. "What have you done?" he asked. She met his gaze. "Nothing," she said. "We just stopped forcing space to behave." The Threxian bridge had known silence before. Moments of tactical focus, brief pauses between commands, the calm before decisive violence. This silence was different. It carried uncertainty. High Admiral Valor did not move for several heartbeats. His eyes remained fixed on the tactical display, replaying the failed firing sequence again and again. The data did not lie. The weapons had discharged at full output. Their trajectories had been correct. Space itself had betrayed them. "Run diagnostics. All systems. I want confirmation that this was not internal interference." The sensor chief complied at once, claws flying across control surfaces. "Diagnostics are clean. Weapon emitters performed within expected parameters. No internal fault detected." Valor's mandibles tightened. "Analyze the distortion. Find the source." The display shifted. Layers of data bloomed outward. Gravitational readings, particle density maps, temporal variance overlays. Patterns began to emerge, faint but undeniable. The sensor chief leaned closer. "Admiral, the distortions are not being projected from the human vessels." Valor turned sharply. "Explain." "They are distributed throughout the engagement zone. Localized space-time fluctuations, subtle, coordinated, as if the region itself is being guided." Guided. The word felt wrong. Valor glanced at the human fleet. They still had not moved. No weapons charging, no engines flaring, just 7 ships suspended in calm defiance. "How long would it take to recalibrate targeting systems to compensate?" The weapons officer hesitated. "Unknown. The distortions are not static. They are responding to our firing solutions in real time." Valor's gaze darkened. "Responding?" "Yes, Admiral. Each attempt to correct trajectory causes the distortions to shift. It's as if space is anticipating us." A chill ran through the bridge. No species manipulated space-time like that, not without massive energy expenditure, not without catastrophic side effects. Such forces were blunt instruments, dangerous even to those who wielded them. And yet the humans showed no signs of strain. Valor opened the channel again. "Captain Ilias, he said, his voice controlled. "You claim restraint, yet you interfere with our weapons." She inclined her head slightly. "We're not interfering with your weapons, Admiral." "Then with what?" "With your assumptions." That answer unsettled him more than any threat. "You believe power must be visible, that force must be applied directly, that space is something to be conquered." Valor did not reply. "We learned early that space doesn't respond well to domination. It resists. It breaks ships. It kills crews." The display behind her showed nothing, no diagrams, no visual proof, just her calm face. "So we stopped trying to overpower it." Valor clicked sharply. "You expect us to believe you are asking space to defend you." Captain Ilias considered that. "Not asking," she said. "Listening." Long before the Threxian Concord rose to power, long before their first golden hulls cut through the void, humanity had struggled simply to survive beyond their home star. Their early vessels were fragile things, thin hulls, crude drives. They failed often, and when they failed, there was no mercy. Space did not forgive miscalculations. Ships tore themselves apart under tidal forces they didn't fully understand. Crews vanished into radiation storms no sensor had predicted. Entire missions were lost to phenomena that defied then-current physics. Other species, faced with such hostility, hardened themselves, thicker armor, stronger shields, ever greater reactors to brute force their way through the dark. Humans took a different path. They asked why. Why gravity behaved inconsistently near massive bodies, why energy bled away in certain regions, why space-time rippled under specific conditions. They listened. They mapped patterns others ignored. They treated space not as an obstacle, but as an environment, one with moods, limits, and responses. And slowly, painstakingly, they learned to move with it. Valor ended the channel without response. "Prepare a containment maneuver. If our weapons cannot strike directly, we will restrict their movement." The Concord fleet shifted outward. Massive ships fanned outward, engines flaring as they formed a tightening net around the human vessels. Gravitational projectors activated, designed to anchor targets in place and prevent escape. "Activate fields," the engineering officer announced. The space around the human fleet shimmered. And then, nothing happened. The gravitational fields failed to anchor. Their vectors bent, sliding off invisible contours in space. Instead of pulling the human ships inward, they dispersed, bleeding harmlessly into the void. The bridge officer stared at his display. "They're not resisting the fields. The fields are missing them." Valor's claws tightened against the command rail. "Increase output." "Admiral," the officer warned, "higher output may destabilize. Do it." The fields surged.
Space responded, not with violence, but with redirection. The increased gravitational pressure folded outward, rebounding through the Concorde formation. Several Threxian cruisers lurched sideways as unexpected forces tugged at their hulls. One ship's stabilizers failed. It drifted, colliding with a neighboring vessel in a shower of sparks and twisted metal. "Damage report," Valor snapped. "Minor structural breaches, no loss of life," came the reply. But the message was clear. Every attempt to assert control made things worse. The human ships remained untouched. Captain Ilias opened the channel once more. "Admiral," she said quietly, "this will continue as long as you escalate." Valor met her gaze, his confidence eroding with each passing moment. "You are manipulating forces that no species should wield lightly," he said. She shook her head. "We're not wielding them, we're accommodating them. That distinction is meaningless." "To you," she replied, "not to the universe." Across the Concorde fleet, confusion spread. Officers whispered. Commanders questioned orders they had never doubted before. The Threxian worldview was built on certainty, on the belief that strength could always impose order, that hierarchy reflected natural law. And yet, here was a species that did not dominate space, yet space itself seemed to favor them. Valor felt the weight of his position pressing down on him. To retreat would be unthinkable. To continue risked catastrophe. "Sensor Chief," he said quietly, "what is the projected outcome if we maintain pressure?" The chief hesitated longer than protocol allowed. "Admiral, the models are unstable, but the trend suggests increasing loss of control. The more force we apply, the more unpredictable the environment becomes, including possible cascade failures, spatial shear, fleet-wide disarray." Valor closed his eyes briefly. Never in his long career had the universe refused to obey. He opened them again, focusing on the human captain. "You claim restraint, yet you have placed us in danger." Captain Ilias's expression softened. "We warned you." "Why not strike us directly?" Valor demanded. "You clearly have the capability." "Because that wouldn't teach you anything, and because we don't need to." She gestured subtly, and for the first time the human fleet moved. Not forward, but apart. Their formation loosened, ships drifting into positions that made no tactical sense by conventional standards, wide spacing, irregular angles. The distortions in space followed them, reshaping gently, like currents adjusting around stones in a stream. Valor felt it then, the realization. They were not trapped in a battlefield. They were inside a system the humans understood far better than he did. And for the first time, High Admiral Valor of the Threxian Concord felt something dangerously close to fear. Fear was not a concept the Threxian Concord acknowledged easily. Their culture did not reward it. Their biology did not favor it. Fear implied weakness, and weakness was corrected early or removed. Yet as High Admiral Valor watched the human ships drift through distorted space-time as if guided by instinct rather than calculation, a deep unease settled into his thoughts. This was not chaos. This was control of a different kind. "Admiral, our navigational lecturer," said carefully, "our fleet cohesion is degrading. Minor spatial inconsistencies are interfering with formation integrity." Valor nodded slowly. He could see it himself. The Concord fleet, once a flawless geometric display of order, now looked strained. Ships subtly misaligned, distances between vessels fluctuating by fractions that should not exist. "Maintain position," Valor ordered. "No independent maneuvers." "Yes, Admiral." He turned his attention back to the human captain. "You have demonstrated your advantage," Valor said over the channel. "State your objective." Captain Mara Ilias did not answer immediately. When she did, her voice carried something new. Not triumph, concern. "Our objective hasn't changed," she said. "We want you to stop." Valor's mandibles twitched. "You expect us to withdraw because you have embarrassed us?" "No," she replied. "We expect you to withdraw because continuing will get people killed. Yours, possibly ours." "By your design," Valor accused. She shook her head. "By your refusal to adapt." Humans had learned long ago that winning and surviving were not always the same thing. On their homeworld, wars were fought not just with weapons, but with logistics, morale, timing, and, eventually, restraint. Every conflict taught them the cost of escalation. Every victory carried consequences that lingered long after the fighting stopped. When humanity reached the stars, they carried those lessons with them. They studied alien warfare doctrine carefully, the emphasis on overwhelming force, on decisive annihilation, on displays of dominance meant to end resistance before it began. Humans understood the appeal. They also understood its limits. Against space itself, brute force had failed them too many times. So they learned patience. They learned cooperation, not just with each other, but with the environment they traveled through. Their warships reflected that philosophy. They were not designed to intimidate. They were designed to endure, and when conflict came, to de-escalate reality itself. Vaylor watched as one of his damaged cruisers drifted dangerously close to a region of intensified distortion. Its engines struggled, stabilizers failing as the surrounding space twisted unpredictably. "Admiral," the engineering officer warned, "the brilliant mandate is losing hull integrity. If the distortion increases, we may lose the ship." Vaylor's claws tightened. Before he could issue an order, Captain Ilyas spoke. "Your cruiser on the outer flank," she said. "Shut down your gravity projectors." Vaylor snapped his gaze back to the display. "Why would I take advice from you?" "Because if you don't," she replied calmly, "the feedback loop will tear your ship apart." He hesitated. Every instinct screamed at him to reject her words, to assert authority, to prove dominance. But instinct had brought them here. "Engineering," he said reluctantly. "Shut down the projectors." The officer obeyed. Almost immediately, the distortion around the cruiser softened. The invisible forces eased, allowing the ship to stabilize. A human vessel drifted closer, not aggressively, but carefully. Space around it smoothed, forming a corridor of relative calm. The Threxian-damaged cruiser slid into it, safe. The bridge was silent. "You assisted us," Vaylor said slowly. "Yes," Captain Ilyas replied, "because we don't need you dead to achieve our goal." "What is your goal?" he asked. She met his gaze, unwavering. "To make sure this doesn't happen again." The Concorde fleet had been built to dominate known space. It had never been built to question itself. Whispers spread across command channels. Officers reported minor injuries, systems strained by unpredictable feedback, crews shaken by the realization that their greatest advantage, raw force, was useless here. Vaylor felt the pressure from all sides: political consequences, military doctrine, the expectations of an empire that had never been denied. But beneath it all was a simpler truth. He had misjudged humanity, not because they were stronger, but because they were wiser. "Captain Ilyas," he said at last, "you speak of restraint, yet your technology gives you absolute advantage. What stops you from using it to dominate the galaxy?" She was quiet for a moment. "When we first discovered this," she said, "we asked ourselves the same question." "And?" Vaylor pressed. "And we remembered our own history. Every time we believed ourselves superior, we paid for it, usually in blood." The distortions around the battlefield continued to shift gently, like a living thing at rest. "This isn't a weapon we can aim. It's a relationship we have to maintain. Abuse it, and it turns on us, too." Vaylor absorbed that. The Threxians had never framed power that way. Power, to them, was something you owned. Humanity treated it as something borrowed. Vaylor looked at his fleet, at the ships damaged not by enemy fire, but because of their own insistence on control. At the human vessels, not untouched because they were invulnerable, but because they did not force reality to break. He made a decision that would echo through Concorde history. "All units," he commanded, "cease aggressive operations. Power down non-essential systems." The bridge froze. "Admiral?" an officer asked, disbelief clear in his voice. "We will not escalate further," Vaylor said firmly. "Not here, not against this enemy." The distortions began to fade almost immediately. Space relaxed, tension bleeding away as the invisible currents settled. Captain Ilyas nodded once. "Thank you," she said. "That was the right choice." Vaylor exhaled slowly.
This encounter will change how the galaxy sees you." She shook her head gently. "No, it will change how the galaxy sees itself." As the fleets disengaged, human ships remained nearby, not as guards, but as guides. They smoothed space-time around damaged Concorde vessels, ensuring safe withdrawal. No shots were fired, no victory banners raised, yet the impact of the encounter spread faster than any battle ever could. Sensor logs, tactical recordings, first-hand accounts from stunned Threxian officers. Stories of a species that did not conquer space, but convinced it to cooperate. Vaylor watched the human fleet prepared to depart. For the first time in his long service, he felt something other than certainty or pride. He felt curiosity and a quiet, unsettling respect. The decision to disengage should have ended the conflict. For most of the Concorde fleet, it did. Orders flowed down command channels, weapons powered down, formations loosened carefully as ships prepared to withdraw from the unstable region. Damage control teams moved through corridors, tending to fractures caused not by enemy fire, but by stubborn defiance of forces they did not understand. But empires were not single minds, and pride, once wounded, did not always obey commands. "Admiral Vaylor," came a sharp voice over a priority channel. "This withdrawal is unacceptable." Vaylor turned toward the source instantly. The holographic form of Fleet Marshal Corvin Thal appeared, commander of the 2nd Expansion Wing. His posture was rigid, mandibles flared and barely contained fury. "You will stand down, Marshal," Vaylor said coldly. "This engagement is over." Corvin's claws flexed. "Over? We have been humiliated by 7 insignificant ships. The Concorde does not retreat." "The Concorde survives," Vaylor replied, "because I ordered it." Corvin cut the channel. Vaylor felt the shift before the alarm sounded. "Admiral," the sensor chief shouted, "Second Wing is reactivating weapons. High-output reactors are spooling." Vaylor's blood ran cold. "Countermand immediately." "They're not responding." On the tactical display, Corvin's ships broke away from the retreating formation. Massive hulls surged forward, weapons arrays igniting with blinding intensity. Captain Ilyas appeared on the channel at once. "This is a mistake," she said, urgency cutting through her calm for the first time. "I agree grimly," Vaylor said. Corvin's ships fired. Not a warning, not a measured strike, everything. Energy lances, kinetic bombardments, gravitational spikes, all unleashed at once, a storm of force meant to overwhelm any resistance through sheer magnitude. For a heartbeat, the void blazed like a newborn star. Then space screamed, not audibly, but violently. The distortions humanity had maintained carefully suddenly surged beyond balance, not because the humans intensified them, but because the universe was being pushed too hard. Space-time buckled.
Beams twisted into spirals, tearing themselves apart. Kinetic slugs slowed, then shattered as tidal forces ripped them into fragments. Gravity wells collapsed into one another, forming unstable eddies that flung Concorde ships off course like leaves in a storm. Corvin's flagship lurched violently. "Hull integrity failing," one of his officers cried. "We're losing control." The words cut off as the ship was dragged sideways, its massive frame bending under forces no structure was designed to endure. Vaylor watched in horror. "This will kill them," he said. Captain Ilyas's jaw tightened. "Not if we act now." Human ships surged forward, not toward Corvin's fleet, but into the heart of the chaos. Every instinct screamed that it was suicide. Space there was unstable, violent, unpredictable. Yet the human vessels moved with precision, slipping through fractures in reality as if they could feel where it would tear next. "Human ships are entering the distortion zone," the sensor chief reported. "They're entering the distortion zone, the chief reported. They're stabilizing it. Valor stared. The space-time resonators aboard the human ships flared, not brightly, not dramatically, but steadily. They adjusted in real time, countering the feedback Corvin's weapons had unleashed. The storm slowed. Not stopped, slowed. Captain Ilias spoke rapidly, issuing commands to her fleet. Her voice remained clear, controlled, even as the environment around them threatened annihilation. "We can't suppress this completely," she said over the open channel, "but we can redirect it." "Redirect where?" Valor asked. There was a pause. "Into empty space," she said, "but it will take everything we have." Valor understood instantly. "You risk yourselves," he said, "for our ships." "For lives," she corrected. The human fleet tightened formation, aligning in a pattern that defied conventional geometry. Their ships formed a lattice, not of metal, but of influence, guiding the violent forces away from the Concorde vessels. Space resisted, then yielded. The storm bent outward, collapsing in on itself and dispersing harmlessly into the void. Silence fell. Corvin's ships drifted, damaged, battered, but intact. Human ships emerged slowly from the fading distortion, scarred now, hull plating warped, systems strained. They had paid a price. Valor exhaled a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. Captain Ilias looked tired. Corvin's channel flickered back to life. His image was shaken, disbelief etched into every line. "You saved us," he said. Captain Ilias's gaze met his. "We warned you." Corvin had no response. Valor addressed the fleet. "Let this be recorded," he said, his voice carrying across Concorde channels. "Today, we learned that power does not always come from force. Sometimes it comes from restraint." No one challenged him. They couldn't. The evidence hung in the void around them. Human ships, scarred, imperfect, and undeniably smaller, had faced down an empire's fury and survived not by breaking the universe, but by refusing to let it break anyone else. The human fleet prepared to withdraw at last. Captain Ilias turned to Valor one final time. "This region will remain open as long as you respect it." Valor inclined his head deeply. "You have my word, and the Concorde's." As the human ships vanished into folded space, the battlefield remained quiet. Not conquered, changed. And throughout the galaxy, the story would spread, not of a battle lost or won, but of a moment when space itself refused arrogance and chose understanding instead. The stars did not remember battles, they remembered balance. Long after fleets withdrew and sensor echoes faded, the region of space where the Concorde and humanity had met settled into a quiet equilibrium. Gravity smoothed, radiation dispersed, the universe exhaled, as if relieved that it had not been forced to tear itself apart.
For the Thraxian Concorde, the consequences began immediately. High Admiral Valor returned to the core worlds not as a conqueror, but as a witness. His after-action report circulated through chambers where no foreign voice had ever been quoted with respect. Tactical councils replayed recordings again and again, slowing them frame by frame. They saw their weapons fail. They saw their formations collapse. They saw human ships move through chaos as if guided by something deeper than computation. And most unsettling of all, they saw humanity choose mercy when domination was possible. The Concorde scholars struggled to categorize what they had witnessed. It was not superior firepower. It was not numerical advantage. It was not even technological supremacy in the traditional sense. It was philosophy, embedded into engineering, a way of interacting with the universe that assumed cooperation was possible. News traveled fast in the galactic network, faster than fleets, faster than diplomats.
Independent traders whispered about it in relay stations. Neutral observers passed fragments of data to their homeworlds. Even ancient species, those who rarely involved themselves in younger civilizations, took notice. A new phrase began circulating in academic and military circles: human-compatible space. Regions where navigation anomalies eased in the presence of human vessels, where disasters became survivable, where routes once considered dangerous grew calmer. At first, many dismissed it as coincidence. Then the evidence accumulated. Human exploration ships escorted convoys through unstable corridors without incident. Rescue operations succeeded where others had failed. Entire stations were saved from collapse because humans arrived not with bigger tools, but with better understanding. The galaxy had long believed space was hostile by nature. Humanity treated it like a partner with boundaries. That difference changed everything. Valor stood alone in the observation chamber of the Ascendant Clarity, gazing out at the stars. His once certain view of the universe had fractured, then reassembled into something unfamiliar, something broader. Captain Mara Ilias's image appeared beside him, summoned by his request. "Captain," she said, "I was told you wished to speak." "Yes," Valor replied. "I wished to thank you, properly." She inclined her head. "You already did, by listening." He considered that. "In the Concord," he said slowly, "we believe hierarchy is natural, that the strong shape reality." "And humans believe," she asked gently, "that reality shapes the strong, whether they acknowledge it or not." A faint smile touched her expression. "You will change your doctrine," she said, not as a question. "Yes," Valor admitted, "we must, or we will break ourselves against forces we do not respect." He hesitated. "Tell me something, Captain. Does your species ever fear what it has learned?" She did not answer immediately. "Yes," she said at last. "Every day. That's why we're careful." Valor nodded. For the first time, he understood that caution was not weakness, it was maturity. In time, humanity earned a reputation that no fleet size could have achieved. They were called when things went wrong, when space lanes collapsed, when stations drifted toward singularities, when wars threatened to tear regions of space apart beyond repair. Humans arrived quietly. They stabilized, they listened, they fixed what could be fixed, and refused to escalate what could not. Some empires still tried to test them. Those encounters rarely ended in spectacle. They ended in silence, in weapons that would not fire straight, in fleets that found themselves lost in currents they could not fight, and in humbled commanders who realized too late that intimidation meant nothing to a species that did not measure power by destruction. Historians would later mark the encounter in the Raylos Expanse as a turning point, not because a great empire fell, but because one chose to learn. Children on distant worlds would study simplified versions of the event, not as a tale of conquest, but as a parable. That the universe was not an enemy to be beaten, that strength was not always loud, that intelligence, empathy, and restraint could shape reality as surely as any weapon, and that humanity, fragile, late arriving, and underestimated, had not survived by dominating the cosmos. They survived by understanding it. Somewhere beyond the mapped stars, space continued its endless motion, curving, stretching, responding to forces both subtle and immense. Most species would never notice. Humans always did. They noticed when space resisted, they noticed when it bent, and most importantly, they noticed when it warned them to stop. That awareness, born of countless failures and hard-won humility, became their greatest strength. And for the first time, the galaxy understood what it truly meant to be human.